Hello class, today what we're going to talk about is performing operations on functions, function operations. What this is adding or multiplying or subtracting functions to each other, okay? So for example, we have f plus g of x. What this means to do is take f of x and add g of x to it. So in this case, f of x is 5x, g of x is x plus 2, so we're going to take 5x plus x plus 2, which gives us 6x plus 2. For subtraction, it works the same way. It's written as f minus g of x, and what this means is f of x minus g of x. So we take that 5x, that was f of x, and we subtract the x plus 2 from it. Distribute the negative in, combine like terms, and f minus g of x is 4x minus 2. Multiplication, we have f times g of x. So f g of x. F of x times g of x is the 5x for f of x times whatever g of x was, in this case x plus 2. So we just distribute that in, and we have 5x squared plus 10x. Division, f divided by g of x. That's f of x divided by g of x. So 5x divided by x plus 2. Now, the domain for these is wherever the domain for f of x and g of x overlap. So if one of them has a domain of x is greater than 1 and the other one has a domain of x is less than or equal to 5, it's where those overlap. So it would be x is greater than 1 and less than or equal to 5. All right. Now, one small problem with the quotients here. When we're dividing, we can't divide by 0. So these were both linear, so this should be all real numbers and all real numbers, so the domain is all real numbers. Except that this can't equal 0. So we can't have x equaling negative 2 because then we would have negative 2 plus 2 is 0. And 5x divided by 0, we can't do that. So the domain here would actually end up being x is not equal to 0. All right. So you gotta watch that on the division ones. So let's do a couple examples here. Here we have f of x is 3 square roots of x, g of x is negative 10 square roots of x. We want f plus g of x, and we want the domain. Then we want to evaluate this sum. What do you get when you hit there? That's the sum. When x equals 4. So first we need to find out what the sum is, this summative function. So we're going to take 3 square roots of x and add it to negative 10 square roots of x. All right. And since these are both square root of x, we can just add them together. And so we have negative 7 square roots of x. So this is the sum. The domain, well, this is a square root function, that's a square root function. They both have a domain of all non-negative numbers. So the domain is x is greater than or equal to 0. The domain here is x is greater than or equal to 0. So when you put them together, the domain is x is greater than or equal to 0. So non-negative numbers. Now, to find out what the value of this is when x equals 4, a couple of ways you can do it. Here's a couple. All right, algebraic approach. We know that this is going to be negative 7 square roots of x, so we can just plug in 4 for x, and negative 7 square roots of 4, which equals negative 14. Now, we can also do this graphically if you have a lovely graphical calculator. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put this into y1, we're going to put g of x into y2, and then we want to graph y3, which is y1 plus y2. So let's take a look at how to do this. All right, so I've already got them in y1 and y2. What we need to do is y3. And so to get f of x and g of x in there, what we're going to do here, vars, this is on a TI-83. If you have something different, you have to figure out where it is. Go to y vars, this is a function, and we want to put this in y1. We want to use y1. So there's y1. We want to add it to y2. So vars, y vars, function, and we want y2. So now I have y1 plus y2, and we can graph it, which, there it is. All right. Now, the book says to use the trace function, and in some calculators maybe you can. I'm not a big fan of it, because if you'll notice on the trace function, I can't exactly get to x equals 4, right? I can get close, but not exactly. So 2 ways you can get around that. Second, calc value, which is number 1 there, and you say, I want to know x equals 4. And there you go. Go straight to that, and x equals 4, y equals negative 14. Same thing we have there. Or you can go to your table, and at x equals 4, y is negative 14. So a couple ways you can get at that. Alright, and there it is on the graph right there. Now let's take a look at this one. This one has f times g of x. We want to multiply. F of x is x squared. G of x is the square root of x. We're going to multiply these together. We want to state the domain, and then what's the product when y equals 9. So what we're going to do, first we have to multiply. X squared times square root of x. And it's kind of weird having exponents and radicals, so we'll change both the exponents. Add your exponents together, and you get x to the 5/2 power. So there is fg of x right there. Domain. Well, this one's quadratic. That one's a square root. So we have all real numbers as the domain for f of x. All non-negatives is the domain for g of x. So where do those overlap? Well, those overlap at non-negative numbers. Those overlap at x is greater than or equal to 0. So our domain is x is greater than or equal to 0. And you can see that here in the graph. All right. Now to find out when x equals the value when x equals 9, you just plug in 9 for x, and we get our answer there of 243. All right. So that's how that works. And here it is in the calculator. And there it is on the table. 9 is 243. All right, so now let's take a look at the division. So f divided by g of x. And here we have f of x is 6x, g of x is x to the 3/4 power. So we're just going to divide those. Not too bad. 6x over x to the 3/4 power. This has an exponent of 1, so you subtract your exponents. And you end up with x to the 1/4 power. There's 6 times x to the 1/4 power. Not too bad. Domain. Well, this is linear, so it's got a domain of all real numbers. G of x is a 4th root there, so it's got a domain of everything greater than or equal to 0. So this is all real numbers greater than or equal to 0. Those overlap at everything greater than or equal to 0. Except this is division, and we can't divide by 0. So let's see here. This will equal 0 when x equals 0. And we can't divide by 0, so that means x can't equal 0. So instead of having a domain of everything greater than or equal to 0, we'll just have a domain of everything greater than 0. So just the positive numbers. And we want to know what do we get when x equals 16, and so we just plug in 16 right there, and we work that out, and we get f divided by g of 16 equals 12. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to work these two out, pause the video, see if you can come up with domain and what these are when the x is whatever it says it wants to be, and then come back and see how you did. All right, let's see how you did. Number 1, there's our answers. Number 2, there's our answers. So with f plus g of x, you should have ended up with 5x to the 2/3 power. Domain is all real numbers, and f plus g of 8 equals 20. F minus g of x should have come up with negative 9x to the 2/3 power. Domain is all real numbers, and f minus g of 8 equals negative 36. F times g of x should have had 3x to the 6/5 power. Domain is all real numbers. F times g of 32 is 192. F divided by g of x is 3x to the 4/5 power. Domain is all real numbers except for 0. And f divided by g of 32 equals 48. If that's what you got, you can fast forward just a touch. If not, let's see why. So for the addition and subtraction, those were pretty easy. You just take the two, f and g, you add them up, simplify it, find like terms. Take your 8, plug it in, and you end up with 20. Subtraction, same thing. We have 2 minus 7, so we got negative 9x squared, x to the 2/3 power. Plug in an 8, and there it is. Now these are both cube root functions, so they have a domain of all real numbers, so our answer on both of these is all real numbers. Alright, so for number 2, first we're going to multiply them together. So to do that, you add your exponents, so you have 3 times x to the 6/5. Plug in 32 for x and you get 192. Now the domain, this is a fifth root function, so it's got a domain of all real numbers. This is a linear function, so it's got a domain of all real numbers. All real numbers combined with all real numbers is all real numbers. Now for the division, we have this. We're dividing, so we subtract your exponents, so 3x to the 4/5 power. Plug in 32, and y is 48. Now, domain here, again, we had all real numbers and all real numbers, but our domain isn't all real numbers. Why is that? Because if I plug a 0 into this, the fifth root of 0 is 0, and we can't divide by 0, so we can't have 0. So everything except for 0. All right. Now, let's take a look at this. Here, it looks like it's the same thing, right? But what this is a shortcut. It's like, yay, shortcuts. Calculator's going to do all the work for me. So we have f of x is the square root of x. G of x is the square root of 9 minus x squared. And we're going to solve all of these operations in the calculator for x equals 2. And so we're going to do it like this. First, put them in your y equals. So there they are. They're in my y equals. Now, go to your home screen. And we want f of x plus g of x. We want y1, which is, here's another way you can get it, is alpha and then the trace button, y1, parentheses 2, just like it was f of 2. We'd have it in parentheses. Then we want plus y2. So alpha f4, y2, parentheses 2, enter, and there it is. And so your calculator will work that all out for you. And so that's like wonderful. And here they are all in the calculator. And so here's your answers. And that's it. And that's all there is to it. And they were like, oh my goodness, that's so easy. And it is. So yeah, nice little shortcut for you. Use your calculator and it's great. So what I want you to do, use your calculator and figure out all the operations here when x equals 4. Then I want you to do it again when x equals 2. All right? Pause the video, work these all out, do them in your calculator because it's easy that way, and then come back and see how you did. All right, you're back. Let's see how you did. So here we go. Number 3, you should have answers of 35.56, 28.44 for the difference. The product to multiply them together, you should have gotten 114.104, and the quotient should have got 8.98. And all that is we're just typing these into the calculator, so it should look like this. There's y1, there's y2, and you should just type them into your calculator, and it would look just like that. All right, number 4. For the addition, we end up with 16. For the subtraction, we end up with 16. For the multiplication, we end up with 0. And for the division, we end up with undefined. All right, we got an error down there. That's no good, which brings us to number 5, which is, why did we get an error? How come we could get numbers for all of these other ones, but not for the division? And the answer to that is, of course, if you plug in a 2 right here, you've got x minus 2 minus 2 is 0. 0 to the any power is 0, and 2 times 0 is 0. You can't divide by 0. So that's the problem. And that's why it works for all of these other ones, but not for the division, because you can't divide by 0. All right. That is operations of functions. Function operations, multiplying and adding and subtracting functions. Hopefully that helps you. You just got to be careful with the division ones. All right. And I'll see you next time.